Hey, and welcome back to your number one source for cozy gaming and design content. I'm Nick, and today we're going to talk about a good old Nintendo classic, Link's Awakening DX. HD. That's right. We're going to be taking a look at what I think is probably the best way outside of something like the Analog Pocket to play Link's Awakening DX. And that is this beautiful fan remake, which adds a lot of really great quality of life features and improvements to the game, which really do help to bring it up to today's standards. But before we get started, why do I care about a fan remake of Link's Awakening? I think that Link's Awakening is probably one of my favorite Zelda games ever made. It's a beautifully crafted adventure, which, if we go based off the other games being released around it for the Game Boy, has absolutely no right being as sprawling and in-depth as it is. The Legend of Zelda series has always been known for their focus on world building and great storytelling. If you're looking for a grand adventure through a classic fantasy world, look no further than Zelda. The basic plot is that you, Link, wake up on Koholint Island with no idea how you got there or where it even is. After waking up in Marin and her father's house, you're given a shield and sent off on your quest to find a way off the island and back to your adventures in Hyrule. Now, if you want to somehow experience the story fresh, I would skip to this timestamp because I'm going to spoil the rest of the plot now. Though I really don't think that really actually ruins the experience of the game. I went in knowing pretty much everything that would happen in the plot of the game. I still had a great time. But if you want to go in fresh, this is your warning. So over the course of your adventure, you meet all kinds of people, animals, and other mystical creatures. Link comes to find that the island of Koholint is not actually a real island, but, in fact, a dream being had by the mystical windfish. This leaves him with the rather tough task of deciding if he should wake up the windfish so that he can get back to Hyrule, but in doing so destroy the island and everyone he's become so close to, or stay in this dream world where he doesn't really have to worry about any of the grown-up responsibilities that he would face in the real world. Now, obviously, the only real way to make that second choice would be to put down your Game Boy and stop playing the game. So the story concludes with Link waking the windfish and returning to life outside the idyllic dream world of Koholint Island. It ends on the rather poignant note that Link had to give up his dreams for the duties that awaited him outside in the real world. Now, I won't sit here and tell you the story in this game, or really any Zelda game, is the most profound or philosophical. These games are made for kids, and this one in particular was made for a pretty young audience. Though, that being said, the themes explored by Zelda games are pretty unique in just how philosophical and deep they get when you take a second look at them when you're a bit older. And I think one of the truly unique things about The Legend of Zelda is how all their games are just as fun and interesting to play as an adult as they were as a kid. However, as I'm sure many of you have come to see if you've ever gone back and tried to play any of your childhood favorite games, it's not always quite as smooth an experience as you might have made it out to be in your head. And a lot of that is down to the massive leaps in gaming hardware and game development that the gaming world has made in the intervening years. However, a lot of that feeling can be negated by loving fan remakes and reimaginings. This is what happens when a fan of a game who has some game development savvy decides they want to take the game they remember so fondly and bring it up to date with modern sensibilities, and get it a little bit more in line with how they remember it being. Oftentimes, this includes adding the much-missed autosave feature that many games of the time lacked for technical reasons, as well as a plethora of graphical improvements. Link's Awakening DX HD is no different. One of the headlining features presented here is the dynamic zoom camera. With this, you're able to zoom all the way out and see the entire map on one screen. Now, in this mode, the game is entirely unplayable, but it very much beats the world map that was included in the original game. which is still accessible in this version. That combined with the full widescreen support makes for a much improved navigational experience. Plus, the developer changed the way that sprites work, and now they have a bit of separation from the background, and it really adds a nice modern flair that, while frankly, I don't think is objectively better because plenty of people would prefer the flat pixel style of the original, but I do think it adds a lot, and it really makes me think how awesome it would be if Nintendo could go back and do this kind of thing with their old games. And maybe give them the Master Chief Collection treatment with the ability to switch between old and new graphics on the fly. I think that would be an amazing little bit of fan service. But I think we all know that won't happen. I can't tell you why, but Nintendo doesn't seem at all interested in doing anything but the bare minimum with their most beloved franchises. And don't get me wrong, I love the new Zelda games, but I definitely think there is plenty of room on the market for a classic remake of these older games. And that brings me to the Link's Awakening remake that Nintendo did do. To be clear, I love this remake. It was actually my first real introduction to Zelda, and I've loved it ever since. However, as much as I love that they did this, it really is the only quality remake that Nintendo have bothered to attempt. And it really just bums me out that they don't think that this is really worth doing. But what really bums me out is that when someone does pick up the obvious slack Nintendo are leaving, and makes a phenomenal remake like this one, Nintendo just comes in and shuts it down. Nintendo is a notoriously litigious company, and they're well known for swift and decisive action against anyone they think might be eroding their IPs. And this isn't without reason, though it is an extremely outdated and archaic way of thinking. I would go check out Moon Channel's videos on the topic because, being an actual real lawyer, they do a great job explaining why Nintendo acts the way they do, even if it is ultimately still the wrong approach to take from a consumer standpoint. Nintendo, the game company anyway, is an extremely young and fairly small company on the world stage. The people who are in charge of Nintendo now were there from the conception of Nintendo as a game company. They have seen all the struggles and battles Nintendo's had to fight hard to get to this point, and they want to avoid that at all costs. And in the corporate hellscape that we live in, they're essentially required by international copyright law to protect their intellectual property with their life, or else risk losing it. And losing it is not an option for Nintendo, because essentially all the value their games offer comes from those IPs. You don't buy a Mario game because it's the definitive best platformer out there. No, far from it, in fact. You buy a Mario game because it's Mario, and you want to see what Nintendo are going to do now. So for Nintendo, the very real threat of losing the exclusive rights to their IP is an existential threat. Again, I highly recommend you go check out Moon Channel's video on the subject. If you haven't already, they do a much better job breaking down this stuff than I could ever do, and this was just a very, very brief summary of the main points of their video. But that's kind of why Nintendo are always in what feels like a constant fight against the very people who love their games. And the story of Link's Awakening DX HD is more of the same. The reason this video is titled what it is because shortly after the game was released, Nintendo had it taken down. Now, fortunately, some amazing people went ahead and put it up on the Internet Archive, so at time of writing at least, it is still possible to play this amazing port of an already amazing game. But whether or not people found a way around Nintendo's lawyers is irrelevant. The reason I'm making this video is to talk about game preservation, and how, while we have come a long way for sure, we still have a very long way to keep on going. Games, as I and many others have said time and time again, are a very new media, and they really are in their infancy when compared to something like books or music or even movies. For everything else, again, like books, we as a society generally agree that it's of paramount importance to preserve what books we can so that everybody can have a chance to read them and hear their stories and learn their lessons, regardless of how good they might be or whose IP it is. And most would agree that at a certain point, art should be made freely available to the public, and that's why we have libraries and museums. Games, however, don't get this same treatment. Games are still very much seen as products and IP, something to be bought and sold and profited from, despite the fact that they are an incredibly strong medium for storytelling and artistic exploration, possibly the most immersive and impressive that we as humans have ever come up with. Now, while Nintendo may have been fully within their rights to take down this fan remake, after all, it was literally billing itself as The Legend of Zelda, which is very much a registered trademark, and if I remember it correctly, it was based off of the original ROM, so that's like a big no-no. And to be clear, I'm not necessarily arguing that it shouldn't have been removed. Its mere existence threatened Nintendo from a legal standpoint, so of course they're going to come take it down. I just think that it's a real shame that Nintendo themselves don't find it to be a good idea to take these old games that people actually do still want to play and modernize them. After all, if a fan can do such an amazing job doing exactly that, I find it very confusing that Nintendo couldn't do an even better job with all the resources that they have at their disposal. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of business reasons that you guys could list off in the comments if you really wanted to, but ultimately I don't care. I'm a consumer. I'm not on the back end of Nintendo. I just want to play their games. I don't really care what business reasons they have for not doing it. I just want to play the games. I mean, come on. This is like their one thing, selling games. And they have the market pretty much cornered when it comes to retro games. I think this fan remake in particular is a perfect example of the creativity and ingenuity that exists in the world of gaming. They not only breathed new life into a game that's 30-something years old, but they made meaningful improvements not only in the addition of free scrolling, but also in a camera that can be pulled out to view the whole map at once. That's just cool! I was super surprised at just how much it changed the way the game played when I was able to pull the camera out like that. Yes, it's not particularly useful when you're playing the game, but I think it is a really great learning tool to show just how important the camera and framing are in a game. And I think it shows really well just how much a game from the Game Boy really was designed specifically for that hardware, with particular aspects in mind. It was incredible to me how much more straightforward the dungeons were when I could zoom out even just 1 or 2 levels. I think things like this are extremely important for learning to understand how games are made and why they're made the way they are. And learning about that helps us as gamers be more informed and have a little bit more context when we're playing games. Learning from the classics is an extremely important part of the creative process. And when things like this get pulled down, fan projects that weren't even asking for money, the collective pool that people can learn from to make better games just shrinks and doesn't help anyone other than Nintendo's bottom line. I really don't have a conclusion here. There is no easy fix to this problem. All I can say is that we gamers are a petty lot, and in this case, that is to our benefit. There will always be fan remakes and reimaginings like this one, and when they pop up, it's very important that we don't let them just go up in smoke like Nintendo and other IP trolls would prefer. But that's it for this video. I hope you had a good time, and maybe you learned something. Either way, I hope you have a great day, and happy gaming.